Series of poker event in December 3rd to 14th. That's a large group. We never had an opposing position. We always just wanted to make sure that the environment, which is so important to what we offer at Atlantis and how we live, is protected.
You're tuned in to the Soul Center podcast. This is more than a podcast. This is a journey. A space where you listen to you. So join us on this journey. Today's guest, we have Vaughn Roberts. We're so honored to have him. Mr. Roberts is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs and Special Projects. And he's also a person who believes in community. And so we're going to hear a little bit about that and his journey. Welcome, Vaughn.
Good to be here.
Yes. So I'm going to dive right in. I want to hear your origin story. I had the privilege of listening to you give a speech the other day, and you told us a lot of things that I didn't know about your past and sort of where you come from and your brought up scene, your background. So I'd love for you to share with people about that.
Yeah, sure. Grew up right here in Nassau. One of 8 kids, number 7 of 8. The first part of my childhood was in sort of a normal family structure. My parents were both married and both in the household. My parents got married really, really young. I think my mother was 16 when she got married. Not unusual for that generation of Bahamian women. Also not unusual for them to have as many kids.
Yeah.
And
some people have 14.
Yeah. And so my dad was the breadwinner. And then at some point early on, my parents got divorced. And so then my mom became sort of head of household for us and largely the breadwinner. And I think what I saw in her, in terms of just how she managed the household and how we survived, really spoke to the times then, which is, you had this extended community of people that supported and sustained families in a way that I'm not sure it exists today. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, transitioning almost immediately because of a separation in marriage from being a housewife,
right,
to then having to support a household of 8 kids,
So were all of you, were they all boys? What was the...
Yeah, no, so there were 6 boys and 2 girls. Mm-hmm. And there's basically like 3 groupings. There's 3 of them, the older ones, they're sort of a year after each other. There's a break, and then there's my 2 sisters, and then there's a break, and then there's the 3 last boys. So by the time I was 10 years old, my oldest brother was 20 years old and probably was already out to work, right? Because then you finish high school, you went to work.
Yeah.
So that was also helpful to sustaining our family in the sense that, as my siblings sort of graduated, they went to work. My brother went to work for BEC as an apprentice. My second brother went to work on the Defense Force as a Marine, and then all of a sudden, this is how this is what your life kind of is, and how it evolves. But what was important as I reflect on that time was just the strength that my mother brought.
I was going to ask about that,
to the home, right, and to the household. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation with her the other day, and she's like, she was almost patting herself on the back that none of her kids kind of went astray. And she also said that she never remarried because she was smart enough to know that anybody who wanted to marry her with 8 kids really wasn't gonna, maybe our situation may not have been better as a result of that. So she's like, I never entertained any proposals to marry anybody.
But it sounds like she had them.
Yeah, she definitely had them, right? But it just meant for us a very close kind of upbringing, and really with a woman at the head of the household.
And this is so interesting to me because this series is about boys, young men, and mentorship and relationship and being in different circumstances in the home. And you come from, you experienced separated parents, divorce, you experienced a single parent household of a female. And I wonder, what advice would you give to boys experiencing these types of things?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really made me appreciate females and the power of females in relationships and in a broader way, the community. But I think the important thing would be, you kind of have to honor your parents, but you also have to keep in mind that they're really interested in setting you up for a better future. Mm-hmm. So every action that they take, conscious or subconsciously, is really meant to kind of like make you a better person or make you have a better future. And I think that's a responsibility of parents. When you get to a single household situation, it's even more pronounced, right? Because you have this one person bearing that responsibility. But my mom was very clever in the sense that she just made sure that we were involved in the right kinds of activities. And she made sure that we did things together as a family and an extended family. And she just tapped into the support system that she had in reflecting back on it now, demonstrating significant leadership, right? For somebody in that situation. And, there were moments when we were punished for doing something wrong. There were certainly arguments, and we all at points thought that she was this crazy woman. But really, she was just navigating us to a place that gave us the future that we have today.
She sounds like a strong woman. And I'm so happy that you're part of this mentorship program. So just a little bit of context for our listeners and our viewers. There's an organization called Roots of Change, of which I am honored to be a part of, founded by Melissa Allen Maynard. And Roots of Change is about sustainable programs for youth, for children, and for women. And so Vaughn Roberts is one of our mentors, and Atlantis came on board as the title sponsor for this amazing 3-year program that pours into young men in the Bahamas and then outputs, data and analysis that can be helpful in guiding these young men to be successful individuals and citizens, productive citizens. So thank you for being a part of the change that you wish to see. And I would love for you to tell us about why you chose to get involved with this program and why Atlantis chose to be involved with this program.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that for me, growing up and then even becoming in my professional life, there's been so much support for me with organizations, with programs such as Mirror Mirror. And I've also been a part of sort of like when I worked in the U.S., Big Brothers, Big Sisters, which is another sort of mentorship program. I think it's important for adults, professionals, particularly to give back in this way. And the impact is far reaching, right? The impact that you have on kids, on children, just giving them this exposure is important. And I think it's also posited back into you, the individual, in terms of your own professional growth and development. And so it's sort of like you win while you're even doing service. And I think that's important. For Atlantis, we saw it as an important opportunity to come out of the gate in the first instance and support a new kind of innovative undertaking. We do a lot of community work that we do at Atlantis, and the community support that we give is really to organizations that have been around forever, like the Red Cross and the Cancer Society and all those things. And 2 years ago, since I joined Atlantis, we took a very deliberate approach to like starting to invest in new ideas very early. And so this was just the project that we saw this year as something we would want to invest in as a startup.
Yeah.
And to lend the franchise and support of Atlantis behind something that could become big and impactful.
Thank you for taking a chance. And I mean, if this isn't an example of doing it for the culture, I don't know what is. You all are taking a bold step and really directly investing in our community, in our boys. And to me, that's significant. That's not a small thing. That's huge. So I want to congratulate you all on doing that.
Yeah, thank you. We're happy to be a part of the journey. Obviously, with an organization of 7,000 employees, it's very likely that some of these boys will end up working for Atlantis at some point in the future. So there's a full cycle thing, but there's just a broader kind of thinking and investment around this community that we take as Atlantis.
That's fantastic. And jumping back to your personal life, I'm wondering, what would you say are some of your most celebrated successes? And how can other boys achieve that?
Yeah, I think, so in high school, I always got good grades. The opportunity to go to college really wasn't as clear, right? So most people at the time were going to COB, which was just a 2-year college. So that was sort of a natural step for me and for a lot of people who performed well academically to sort of like go beyond high school. But then transitioning from COB to college in the US was a bigger step and required like finances. And
You were in Illinois, right?
Well, I did my undergrad at FIU, Florida International University of Miami. But you're going as an international student, you need all this money, you need to demonstrate that you have all this support. So part of it was scholarship, but then part of it for being the first in my family was a big step too, right? To make. I didn't think about this at the time, but as I have had conversations with my extended family over time, a lot of people who have got in my family who've gone to college after me tell me that I was really the role model and the impetus, and I paved the way. I showed them how to do it. So that was, in reflecting back on it now, it was a big success for me. The other thing that I take an enormous amount of pride in and accomplishment and achievement in was the time that I spent working for Bahamas, which was, a period where I'd lived in the U.S. for a long time. And then in 2006, I came back to work with the initial developer of Bahamas on Bahamas. And so, the thing that brought me back was this idea that was big enough and felt like it was world-class enough, and that it had significant impact for the Bahamas. So those were the things I considered when I decided to come back. But the experiences being there and creating what we created in terms of the physical elements of Bahamas, like the construction itself and the buildings and the campus, was significant. But more importantly, sort of the culture of the organization that we created while we were there. And a part of that really was we were able to a lot of it through my effort, attract a number of Bahamians who lived outside, like younger Bahamians who were finishing up college.
Bring them back
home to this culture of, a lot of hard work, new ideas are appreciated. There's really no hierarchy. I mean, Sarkis would interact with everybody at the time who was working for us in a very personal way. And so we really created this exciting work culture that would become a part of the service culture for Bahamas once it opened. And, that was just significant. It was just significant to work through that, how do we get Bahamians to approach work in a new kind of way? How do we create a culture where Bahamians who study abroad can come home and find place and find a progressive and rewarding kind of work environment right out of the gate? And all those things were very important to positioning Bahamas, and I think a lot of those things they've carried through in the operation of it since it's been open.
It's fantastic. So you've come a long way, come from humble beginnings, and now you're the VP at Atlantis. So what's the secret sauce? How? What do you do? Yeah. How do I, as a young lady, as a young boy, dare to dream of that? How do you go about that? What is that path?
Yeah, it's different for everybody, but I can tell you that what has worked for me really well is education, right? Like in deciding to be an accountant, I set myself on a path that I needed to go to college, then I needed to sit the CPA exam, which required that I needed to go to grad school at the time for a year. And in every step along the way, I was really conscious about upgrading the environment that I was in. Hands down, College of the Bahamas was an awesome academic experience. When I went to FIU, FIU in Florida had probably the strongest accounting program at the time. And then I went from FIU to the University of Illinois that arguably had the first accounting program in the U.S. and the most respected accounting program. And then, I worked for a while, and then I ended up doing a master's, an MBA at the University of Chicago, which is one of the top 5 business schools in the country. So I was deliberate and intentional about putting myself in environments where the top performers were there, right? So because that's where you're going to grow. And it created, what it did over time was just created opportunities for me to work with like world-class firms in the U.S. And those experiences just positioned me to think about and even be recruited for the opportunity to come back to the Bahamas and work for Bahamas. So it really is kind of being intentional about education and getting all of the credentials that you can and putting yourself in experiences that develop and stretch you, and always trying to upgrade the setting that you're in, right? The setting that you're working in, the setting that you're studying in, always making sure that you're working with the best and brightest.
Yes.
And that's worked for me. I mean, it's helped me kind of being able to kind of vacillate between working in the Bahamas and working back in the U.S. So I'm at Atlantis today because it was an interesting opportunity that presented itself, but I was working in the U.S. before I came to Atlantis. So, it's just very important to be in these kinds of environments where it's the right kind of opportunity for you. There's growth potential, and there's the right kind of learning that can happen for you as well. Because even though I'm a senior vice president, I learn every day in the environment that I'm working in from the people who I work around. And that's helped to broaden my skill set and hopefully kind of make me even more attractive for future opportunities as well.
Yeah. So what drives you as a person?
It's when it comes to my professional life, it really was what I saw in my household, which is my mother got up every day, and opened up the house, prepared the meal for the family, went to work, came back from work, prepared dinner. It's just a very clear kind of work ethic, right? And a very clear pattern of kind of your day that just stuck with me. And so, I don't do much. Working is just kind of like second nature to me. And in the course of my study and working, I kind of like working where there's like problem solving issues and problem solving things, right? So, it's just that's what it's been. It's just every day you get up and you go at it.
Yeah. So what is that thing that wakes you up besides work, or maybe it connects to work, but that essence? Yeah.
So over time and just with exposure, both here and abroad, it's really caused me to have a big interest in community, right? And more than self, for me, it's kind of like it's the community, and particularly as you start to get older as well, you start to think about like what legacy is going to be, and like how are you really assessing your success and your impact. And for me, it's really been focused in on like the people I'm impacting, and it in some ways it doesn't always have to be like direct impact. Like what I found, even when I was at Bahama, was just my presence there in the role I was in, was impacting people who I didn't even know in the organization. And I think some of that is at play here at Atlantis too. Like when I show up here as a senior vice president and not necessarily stuffy or just it.
No, you're cool.
I think it for the young housekeeper or whatever. It just says something about the possibilities for their own lives, right? So I don't take that lightly. It's an important part of what I value as my success and my impact. But community is very important.
Yeah, I can tell. And you're very accessible, like you said. And you've used the words several times now, community, culture. So these are things that I think are at your core and very important. And it's being reflected in your job at Atlantis. So why Atlantis? What is so special about Atlantis?
Yeah, for me, what really drew me here was, it's a huge organization. And I think having a good appreciation for the Bahamian economy and the future of the Bahamas, tourism is where we're at. And that's not going to change tomorrow. In fact, there's countries all over the world trying to do tourism more and better. So when I thought about it, a large organization like Atlantis here in the Bahamas that's been around for 25 years, it just felt like a good brand that's in some parts of the world more known than the Bahamas itself.
Wow.
The Atlantis brand is very, very global in terms of how many people know it, and the brand equity that's with it. So it was just an opportunity to come in to an established organization that obviously needs some retooling, and perhaps even some further investment. And in the face of the competition, which I happen to know really well,
that was convenient.
Yeah, it just felt like an interesting opportunity to be able to make impact, right? And so much of it is not just about the work that we're doing today, but it's how we're positioning Atlantis for the future. And then obviously in the process, using that platform to create opportunities for Bahamians well into the future, right? Mm-hmm. I also felt that it was important to be here in the Bahamas to demonstrate that, Bahamians could ascend the ranks of tourism, and that even people who have a background that's not traditional hospitality. So I didn't start as a housekeeper. Mm-hmm. I worked for an accounting firm, did investment banking, did all these things, and here I am at Atlantis, right? So I'm not a hotel operator per se, mm-hmm. but I also thought it was important for somebody like me to plant my feet in the sector that's so important to the Bahamas, and to then create a voice that is a voice of opportunity for people coming behind me.
Wow. Yeah. That's empowering. Well, thank you for your service and the great work you do. And we're so happy to be here at Atlantis Paradise Island. We appreciate your support. Now, I have the really hard question that stumps a lot of people. Ready?
Yeah.
What are your top 3 songs on your playlist currently?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I've been listening to a lot of Burna Boy mm-hmm. recently. I saw him in concert at Coachella this year.
Nice.
See him again at I'm going to South Africa in a few weeks, and we'll see him in concert there. The songs, I can tell you the artists.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me the artists. That's fine.
So that I've been listening a lot to a lot of John Legend's music. Mm-hmm. And then I've just recently started to listen a lot to Exuma the Obeah Man's music.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and it's a friend of mine sent me that link to that special that was done on him, and how big he was as a musician outside of the Bahamas, and a lot of people don't even know.
Yeah.
And so I was taking the time to go through his whole library of music just recently.
That's interesting. I've been doing the same recently. And I'm fascinated with, Obeah and the whole concept of that. I'm calling myself a Cat Island woman now, although not originally from Cat Island. But our culture is just so textured and interesting, and it's reflected in the music. So yeah, I enjoy that music.
And then also, it's just interesting to see how the Bahamian diaspora has kind of spread across the world in ways, sometimes in very interesting ways that we don't know here in the Bahamas, right? So mm-hmm. more of those stories need to be told so that people can see the potential and the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, and thank you for being a part of wanting to tell those stories and telling those stories now at Atlantis. I think that's such a unique and cool introduction. I like the direction.
Sure.
So last but certainly not least, I would like you to look at that camera. And I'd like you to give a message to the boys of the Bahamas. What do you want them to know? What's the best advice you can give them?
Yeah, I think the best advice really is that, the community needs boys to become great men. Our future is not as bright without you standing up as great men. And that can mean a lot of different things, but what it does mean is you showing up in the circumstance that you're in, being present, seizing the opportunities, and taking care of your community, taking care of your people, your tribe, because that's what men do. And we need every one of you to stand up as men for us to have the biggest opportunity for the future of the Bahamas.
Vaughn, thank you for journeying with me.
Thank you.
And thank you for journeying with us. Hopefully, you got centered.